I am currently an independent advisor for both startups and companies, larger companies. And in the past, I was at SAP for nearly 18 years, variety of roles. Most recently was a global VP for our business technology platform business, where I was responsible for go-to-market with several of our lines of businesses and also professional services, as well as commercialization. So for SAP, commercialization was pricing and packaging, and had the opportunity to really lay the foundation for some of the pricing that we're now seeing with AI. And then just prior to that, I was the COO of our business that was called Enterprise Collaboration, which eventually merged to our platform business, and several roles before that, some entrepreneurial, some kind of core business.
So you've spent a fair bit of your career in the heart of the SaaS beast, seeing it from earliest conception all the way through some of its major growth.
I did, and I saw it not only from kind of the product and the functionality and the building of the system standpoint, but also from the transition from on-premise to SaaS and what it takes to do a transformation, some of which I think is certainly relevant for AI.
Well, especially because there's a big argument going around that we're moving in the opposite direction. We're going back to on-prem for data security and air gap. Like, if the AI is commoditized, do we want to give all of our data to Claude and Anthropic? Do you want to give it all to ChatGPT, or are you working with local models? There was a question that we talked about getting into that I actually think I want to kick this off with, which is the SaaS apocalypse is something that is talked about with increasing regularity. Bain Capital, for example, decided to go in and say, okay, right now what we do is we look at all of our SaaS products and any company that wants our investment or that's been our portfolio, and we have a room full of guys that go in and can we create a reasonable facsimile of this product with internal tools? And if the answer to that is yes, we pull our investment. That has massive potential ramifications for the entirety of the software industry. From somebody who worked in it for so long, what are your feelings about is it overblown? Like, where are we going?
Well, I feel that it is overblown, and maybe I'm just a little bit biased, but I do see, a couple of things happening. The SaaS market, the companies that are well established, are strong, they're moving very quickly in AI. And so I don't think they're standing still. I don't think they're looking at the same platforms that they had before. They're looking how they can incorporate AI. And I think the best of the companies are going to evolve their platforms in a couple of ways. One is to make the software much more composable. So that is a trend that we've been talking about probably for 5 years now, whereby you do have these individual processes, which is essentially how AI native solutions are developed. And you still have a platform behind it, which I think is critical for consistency, for scalability. And that is the thing that I worry about on some of the AI native applications. Are they just a bunch of composable processes, if you will, and then do they have the other aspects of the platform that they need for true adoption and true scalability? And that may mean a platform for how you actually construct the agents, how you orchestrate them, how you get enterprise knowledge and tribal knowledge in there. So the incumbents really have some key advantages in that way if they can evolve their software, and it may start with putting agents, embedding it basically in the workflow products and making sure that those agents work across the silos of applications. It will be up to them to orchestrate that and orchestrate it in a scalable way. So I think, my own view is, yes, they're under pressure. The incumbents are under pressure, but there's a lot of room for them to change and adapt and then take the advantages that they have of platform consistency, enterprise knowledge, et cetera, that in the end could be the competitive moat, if you will.
But you can't copyright a process in this case, or can you?
We never copyrighted processes, but how you treat the agents, how you look at those processes, where you inject the human in the loop, and that may change over time now, but how you build trust with that. The enterprise knowledge that's behind that they can draw on, I think is really critical and actually will be a competitive advantage.
Well,
And
when you say enterprise knowledge, do you mean the SaaS company's enterprise knowledge or all of the data that they've basically had access to from all of their clients?
it's the latter,
Hmm.
right? And that they've gotten approval from to use. Even 2 or 3 years ago, SAP talked about the tens of thousands of records that they had from customers. The records were anonymized, but basically they could be used to train the AI models. And now I think we need to expand that definition. It's not just training them on the processes and the data and the trends behind that. But these platforms are also being able to ingest tribal knowledge. So what did you write in your email? What do you have in your notes? What's in your Slack channel? Picking up all that tribal knowledge of the employees and making that usable and available for the agents. I think that in the end will be one of the competitive moats, versus the native AI companies.
Is that a competitive moat, though? Because what you're talking about is an API call and an agent interacting with proprietary data. It is not the SaaS company's proprietary data, it is the client's proprietary data. And their competitive advantage at that point is, to your point, their experience, their history, their legacy software. But if Claude and Anthropic can walk in and say, oh, well, you could dump all of your stuff into, this system, or you could just dump it into us and we can do it for you for cheaper, they're going to.
Well, I think, we have to clarify the models from the processes. It's important, and I think companies are looking at multiple models. They don't want lock-in with the models. The models are as good as the data that they're trained on, which is that enterprise data. I don't think, and I may be wrong, but I don't think the Claudes of the world or the Anthropics or the OpenAI have the same level of data. And API calls alone don't have that knowledge or intelligence. They transfer the data, right? And it's very important, obviously. But we're looking ultimately for the combination of the actual processes, which still are structured processes. Are they going to be any better than a native AI? Maybe not, but it'll be the things around it. The ability to access, as an example, that enterprise context.
Ultimately, who is going to be more efficient and productive, and where is it's the cost-benefit analysis, I imagine, that people are choosing. Am I going to give money to Salesforce, or am I going to spend more on tokens and in-house solutions? And everyone's going to have to make that decision for themselves.
Exactly. And I think, the thing that is changing, I think there are several things that are changing, but one of it is the value of a platform approach in general. And I don't mean when I say that you have to be a monolithic enterprise platform. I think those platforms are going to kind of be much more composable. But when you want to scale, platforms historically have been the way that you've been able to scale in a very consistent and kind of governed way. I think that's going to be, another advantage for these companies. So, we can talk about why, is AI really going to survive, or is it just a bunch of pilots? Why aren't people able to scale? There have been a couple of studies that have shown, I think it was actually a BCG study, that said something like around 74-75% of what's being done now remains in a pilot. And doesn't get beyond that and doesn't really deliver value. Turns out that there are some things that you need in order to make it scalable. On the company side, you need to look at processes that really have shareholder value or, will deliver ROI. both to the customer and to the vendor. Those typically cut across the entire organization. So many of our pilots have been really focused on one area, one small area, kind of isolated, see how it works. Turns out, you can get more value if you have something that cuts across. I mean, if you think about any major process, they cut across multiple applications. So you kind of need this platform notion, I think, is going to become more important, to help with scalability.
You've been working in the Valley for a long time. You've seen various changes. You've seen the rise of software as a service. You've seen the rise of social. You've seen the delivery of Web 2.0 and everything that means, which has created an extraordinary amount of wealth in the country. At this point in your life and your career, and you're looking at where things are you more optimistic about where things are going, or are you a bit more trepidatious as to what's being developed?
Well, I've got some trepidation about AI in general. I think that if we're not careful, it certainly has the potential to take away some of the critical thinking skills that we need going forward. It can be very easy, whether it's a consumer or business, to just blindly accept what the AI engine tells us. And it looks good. It's usually pretty general. It kind of sounds good and sophisticated, and then we go with it. If it's not tied to enterprise knowledge and data in some context, then hallucinations, are still there. So I do worry about people's willingness to still engage in critical thinking about the output that they're getting out of the AI. So I'm, a little bit more cautious about that. I think there is this notion of, brain buzz. I mean, it's just coming at me. Things are coming so fast and you kind of give up. And ultimately, I think it's not that the things that make it stressful for people are the fact that timelines are getting compressed. It's not that, process is done faster. I mean, that's good. You don't want to do the administrative work. But everything is so compressed that you're moving very quickly from one thing to the other thing, and you're trying to catch up. And we're all human, and can we keep up with that level of change so quickly?
I mean, the promise of tech has always been that, oh, it's going to give you time back. And that never happens. We always end up filling the spaces. We always end up filling the time with something else. To your other point about that particular fear, I can't remember if it was Socrates or Plato that when the written word was developed was worried that it was going to make people dumber because people weren't memorizing and learning the epics and the stories like they used to. So that also seems to be a constant, ever-present human fear.
Yeah.
The question always comes down to right now, is AI different? Is it different than every other, transformative technology that's come out before? You've engaged with it. How often are you using it right now?
I use it multiple times a week on different kinds of activities. I mean, I'm not in directly every day in doing a particular, set of tasks, but, I can tell you where I find it helpful is if I've done the thinking ahead of time, and then I might use it to help tune or refine things. And I think it's very good there. Sometimes at the front end, it'll help organize some things. But again, there's that very careful balance, I think, between letting it do everything for you, think, and kind of you just passively accept it, versus the individual really thinking, applying their knowledge, applying their creativity, their intuition to, is it right or is it wrong? I am hopeful because you asked that at the beginning of the question. I mean, I'm hopeful in a couple of ways. One, uh, I think people are worried about the potential impact of AI. And so I think this is a good thing. I think that makes us more cautious about using it, um, and maybe more selective. I think there are, I know Gen Z people, a handful that don't want to really touch it that much because they want to value their thinking and they're skeptical about the results. I think we all have to use it, but I think that skepticism is good. I think people don't really want to, have this go the way of social media platforms. And that gets into the whole topic of, you know, ethics and judgment and all that, and follow the money tree and kind of what that means. Um, but I am, I think there's a healthy skepticism from enough people that hopefully, that will help us avoid blindly, accepting and going down the path.
What you're saying is fear is actually a good thing. Like
Yeah,
fear is actually thinking fear, not unthinking fear.
right.
Don't be like, because you make bad. The flip side of that is people tend to make bad decisions when they're afraid of something. But if you are skeptical, which is skepticism can also be interpreted as a fear response to certain things.
Yeah.
This is so transformative, this is so potentially impactful that if you are not approaching it with both an open and skeptical eye, it could go really bad really quickly. Your point about social media is also very interesting because I think we all approach social media as, well, look at this wonderful thing that is connecting us all as a society, but we were never thinking of the second and third order effects that would result from that. And we're all kind of dealing with the ramifications of that. Are there any second or third order effects that you're worried about with AI?
Well, I'm worried about the fact that there will likely be second and third order effects, and we don't quite know where that will go.
Hmm.
So we just
Give me your worst case scenario. Like, what is that thought that keeps you up at night right now?
that people blindly accept it without any governance or policies, and very bad decisions are made and bad outcomes are made.
You're talking to startups and boards all the time. Are you seeing that happen?
They are very concerned, about these issues. So I think, the one thing that gives me hope is that people are thinking about how to govern this. And, they're doing it in a way now that will also help boost the belief and the trust, I think, in AI. So there are, again, going back to kind of platform capabilities, at least incumbents are thinking about how do you govern and how do you build governance and policies and authorizations into the workflow processes. What agents get to talk to what agents, what data gets passed between agents to keep the policies, that you want in place. Those are really important. I think many companies are lagging. I don't think AI native companies are quite thinking that way because they're doing interesting processes. For example, supply chain. You can put together a lot of different processes, and you put the processes and they move around and you think it's all fine. But they don't necessarily have the governance platform attached to that is going to help and manage and make sure. So,
Does that need to be solved by private industry or is that government regulation?
no, I think I'm speaking of it in the context of private industry.
But can private industry do it on its own?
Well, companies do it today. They have security policies and so on. I think there will probably be a role for government. I haven't, I'm not a student of that in terms of what the government should do. I mean, at SAP, I was on the receiving end of a lot of European government regulations.
How is
And
that?
some are good. Some are good and some are overreach. It's not that they're bad, but overreaches can be a big problem, and it can really slow down technological advances and development. So there's a real balance there. I do think there will be some role for government. I personally hope it's not as stringent as Europe has traditionally taken with all its other regulations. And you gotta ask, is some of that necessary? What's the cost of that, and so on.
I'm not particularly concerned about the current administration being super stringent in some of the policies they put
Yeah,
out
although
there.
they did recently talk about having some AI policies, I was shocked.
They talk about having them. I mean, I think it's going to be more like, pull this one for right now and let these
Yeah,
guys use
good.
it, but nobody else. Um,
But I think companies are concerned about that. I mean, real live operating companies that are trying to deliver value to their customers.
well, the value side is also important. Are they more concerned about the value and the ROI that they're getting out of this new technology? Or are they more concerned about the potential, sociological security ramifications of it?
Well, I think they need to be concerned about both. And again, I think that established companies who are users of this technology, businesses, are concerned about both. I mean, I never, in my years in business, before SAP, I was at Accenture and then I was at a couple startups. We never really wanted to break the law, right? We never really wanted to screw the customer badly, right? The intent typically was, really higher level, above board, and do the right thing. And so maybe I'm more optimistic that way about companies. I mean, I am concerned about the ethos of some of our social media companies, for sure. I'm concerned about the ethos of some of our LLM companies. I mean, we're even seeing some differentiation there between some of the companies. So, yeah, it's not going to be a perfect world, but I'm hopeful to to get back to your earlier question that most companies who want to have a real customer base, who want to grow, who want to deliver customer value will think about these things, because I think their customers will as well. I mean, it costs a lot of money if you have a data breach. And I don't think people, will say, hey, I can get 2 times more efficiency and forget the data breaches. Eventually that hurts the brand. So maybe that's the optimistic side.
I mean, eventually we're going to have to establish some kind of rubric for determining the good actors versus the bad actors. And in my mind, it comes down to, is the goal of your product to help your customer, or is the goal of your product to engage your customer, which are two very different bottoms of that funnel, because engagement is, as we've seen with social, it sounds great.
Yeah.
But the downstream consequences of it can be pretty dire.
Yeah. I think that, there's also a distinction of B2B and B2C.
Sure.
And I think that on the B2C side, the engagement with these algorithms, the way in which they do them can be very damaging. I mean, we've seen some proof of that. On the B2B side, engagement is defined a little bit differently. And
it is, but I mean, to a certain extent, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the addiction. On the B2C side, we're talking about how can you addict someone to your platform.
right.
On the B2B side, how do you addict a company to your product? And
Right.
that language there, like, it is the thing that they need and cannot give up. And if they were to give up, it leads to negative consequences.
Correct. At that level, that could happen. But if I think about, or when I think about this, and I think about, an engagement layer, and I'm thinking about it from, let's say, a vendor perspective, an SAP perspective, or even if I'm like a retailer, engagement is defined a little bit differently. So engagement for a SaaS company is using a new engagement layer that is conversational. It has entirely different characteristics in enabling someone to develop and create. I'll call it an AI app, if you
Well,
will.
it's
Right?
a UX,
It's a
accessible
UX
medium
layer,
piece.
right?
Yeah,
It's
sure.
a new UX layer, and yes, it is designed to pull you in because it's going to be so easy for you to engage with these agents and build assistants and do all this. So you want to make it easy. I mean, we never loved the UI of SAP software. We don't need to go back to
Yes, but the product of that engagement
Yeah.
is ease of use of platform for specific outcome, not, to your point, more attention. Not, yeah,
Exactly.
no, I
Right.
think that's fair.
It's a different definition of either engagement or attention.
Well, Sheila, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.